Ms. Andisi Banyoni, and then to my far left is the Deputy Public Protector, Advocate Kolega Galega, and of course the Public Protector, Advocate Mrs. Tabani, to whom I now hand over so she can address the House. Over to you, people.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Sefalwe, Program Director, Deputy Public Protector, Advocate Galega, CEO, Ms. Banyoni, COO, Ms. Mama Bolo, Chief of Staff, Mr. Libello, all executive managers, members of staff, members of the media. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today marks the eve of the end of the 2021-2022 financial year, a moment during which we look back at the last 12 months with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that we did our best to improve the lives of the grassroots communities out there. We have just begun preparing the 2021-2022 annual report, which will carry the final details of our efforts for the period under review. However, I wish to sample a little of the impactful work we carried out in the public health sector when we launched and completed multiple investigations into public hospitals in the 5 provinces, which is, in fact, 16 public hospitals, 5 in Gauteng, in fact, 6 in Gauteng, 4 each in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape, and 1 in Limpopo and Mpumalanga, respectively. It's heartening to know that public health authorities in the provinces in question welcome our findings and remedial actions with open arms. Fully implemented, those reports have the potential to really impact the lives of grassroots communities who depend on the public health sector for the well-being for their well-being. We also put out a report that laid bare the systemic service delivery problems that gave rise to violent rebellion we witnessed in Alexandra 3 years ago, coming up with remedial actions that the responsible organs of state, chiefly the city of Johannesburg, have embraced and are implementing to turn the tide against the indifference that the people of that township have endured over the years. In addition, we have just concluded an eye-opening stakeholder roadshow, during which we observed firsthand the appalling conditions that have sadly become a normal way of life for many South Africans, underscoring the reality that fruits of our 28-year freedom and democracy have yet to reach in the margins of our society. In some of the worst cases, we saw how residents of the N2 Gateway flats in Langa, Cape Town, find themselves having to reside in government-provided housing units with an acutely defective sanitation system, which literally result in dwellers living with human excrement on their doorstep. We observe similar scenes at Greenpoint in Kimberley, where people's homes are surrounded by pools of sewage with a heavy stink wafting in the air all around the neighborhood. Everywhere in the city, a large man-made lake of sewage runs deep and wide, threatening to submerge the busy R31 road, which connects the Northern Cape capital with Berkeley West. Above all, the roadshow presented an opportunity for us to bring to the attention of the nation the wanton disregard of our remedial action by some organs of state across the board, threatening to render this important independent constitutional institution a good-for-nothing body in the eyes of those who need its services the most. We also got to shine a spotlight on how traditional authorities tend to be rendered redundant in municipal councils, in areas that observe customary law when they should be playing an active role in bringing about development in their areas of jurisdiction. We hope that all of the provincial executives and legislatures will make good on their undertaking to act on these concerns so that the system functions just as it was designed to. A report on the roadshow is being prepared to document our observations and the undertakings made. It will go a long way in helping us to monitor progress and see to it that authorities make good on their commitments. Today, as we wrap up the financial year, we release 9 investigation reports covering a range of themes, including undue delays to process applications for public services, irregular appointment of staff, irregularities in public procurement processes, financial mismanagement, and executive ethics. One of the closing report which we issue in cases where allegations are unsubstantiated or cannot be corroborated, while a few others are advisory reports which we issue to offer advice on how to remedy issues we observed in the course of investigations. And this is because of the good work which the staff led by the executive managers and the CEO have been able to do. So the closing report which we have is Shivambo versus Godan, the report 107 of 2021-2022. We investigated allegations of a breach of the executive members' ethics code by the Minister of Public Enterprises, Mr. Pravin Godan, in that he tried to influence the appointment of his friend, Judge Daya Pillay, to a position of responsibility in the judiciary during a meeting with the former Chief Justice, Mr. Mogoeng in Cape Town. The investigation followed economic freedom fighters, Deputy President and Chief Whip, Mr. Floyd Shivambo's complaint lodged in terms of Section 4, subsection 1 of the Executive Members Ethics Act in April 2021. We have had to close this investigation because Mr. Shivambo's allegations could not be corroborated. The investigation revealed that when Mr. Godan and Mr. Mogoeng met at the 12 Apostle Hotel and Spa, Victory Street, Camps Bay, Cape Town on 6 April 2016, the spokesperson for the Judicial Service Commission had already announced the interview results, and it was already public knowledge that Daya Pillay had not made it. It would therefore be factually or legally impossible for Mr. Godan to have influenced the outcome of the interview that had already been concluded. Accordingly, Mr. Godan's conduct could not be regarded as having been in breach of section of paragraph 2.1c and d and paragraph 2.3b of the Executive Ethics Code. The next one is an advisory report, Kanare versus the Department of Correctional Services. We investigated allegations that the Department of Correctional Services failed to pursue disciplinary action against officials implicated in the commission of inquiry into state capture in respect of tenders awarded to African Global Operations, previously known as BUSASA. Mr. Kanare, the late General Secretary of COPE, lodged the complaint in March 2019. In his complaint, Mr. Kanare alleged, among other things, that the former Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Advocate Masuta, issued a statement that he would be suspending officials implicated in evidence before the commission. However, the only official that has since been suspended is Dr. Dive. He added that no such suspensions or disciplinary hearings have been instituted against Ms. Grace Mulatedi, the former Free State Regional Commissioner of Correctional Services, who was implicated by Agrizi during his testimony at the commission. Mr. Kanare also alleged that during the former minister's stay in Port Elizabeth at the home of Mr. Gavin Watson, or the late Gavin Watson, the then CEO of BUSASA, the BUSASA catering tender was discussed and arrangements were finalized regarding the extension of the contract. In addition, he alleged that SIU investigated the catering contract between BUSASA and the department, and that the former minister failed to take cognizance of that investigation, resulting in the department continuing its contract with BUSASA. Having analyzed the complaint, we decided to investigate whether the minister, Masuta, failed to pursue disciplinary action against the department officials implicated in the commission, and if so, whether such conduct amounts to improper conduct and maladministration. Our investigation revealed the matter did in fact receive the former minister's attention, and that the department, even though some of the matters may still be pending, this is evidence from the letters dated 13 and 14 February 2019 that the department issued to the implicated officials, including Ms. Muladeli, prior to the complaint being lodged with us. The decision to suspend or take disciplinary action against the officials is subject to the provisions of Section 185 of the Labour Relations Act, which stipulate that every employee has a right not to be unfairly dismissed and subjected to unfair labour practice. So the Commission handed over its report on the inquiry into Busasa, which was made public on the 1st of March 2022, taking into account that the department did pursue oral evidence of Mr. Agrize and that written evidence from the Commission was not available to it at the time. It is recommended that in terms of Section 6, subsection 4C, Roman figure 2 of the Public Protector Act, that the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services considers and inform us within 60 days from date of this report on the recommendations to deal properly with the subject matter of investigation. This should include taking urgent steps to intervene and ensure that the National Commissioner of the Department acquires all relevant evidence and statements from the Commission on the transactions involving officials of the department and that are identified as unlawful, irregular, or improper in the final report of the Commission. Further, and on receipt of such information from the Commission, ensure that National Commissioner of the Department analyzes the evidence in order to identify all officials of the department implicated by the evidence and, if required, take the necessary action in terms of Section 38 of the Public Finance Management Act, and including criminal charges and institution of disciplinary action where appropriate. The next matter we investigated is Ntuli versus the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, which is CSIR. We investigated allegations of maladministration and improper conduct relating to the failure of CSIR and the Department of Science and Innovation to inform the complainant, Mr. Melusi Ntuli, about his placement on the Grassroots Innovation Pilot Project. The investigation was also about allegations of irregular termination of the MOU, in fact, Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, entered into between CSIR's Technology Localization Implementation Unit and Melus Driving Solutions, a company which Mr. Ntuli was a director. The investigation stemmed from a complaint Mr. Ntuli lodged in January 2020. Having analyzed the complaint, we decided to investigate whether CSIR and the DSI failed to inform Mr. Ntuli about the placement on the GIP program aimed at assisting people with innovative ideas to market their ideas, and if so, whether such conduct constituted maladministration and improper conduct. Having regard to the investigation conducted in the matter, the evidence and the information obtained therewith, it may be concluded that DSI introduced the GIP program hosted by CSIR aimed at assisting people with innovative ideas to market their ideas. In the circumstances, the CSIR and or DSI did not violate Mr. Ntuli's rights to administrative action that is lawful, reasonable, and procedurally fair as guaranteed in the Constitution and in the relevant legislation relating to be given decisions. Regarding the second issue and having regard to the investigation conducted in the matter, the evidence and information obtained therewith, it may be safely concluded that a cancellation and or repudiation of the MOA between the parties was as a result of Mr. Ntuli's exercise of his rights to exit the agreement afforded in terms of the MOA. In the circumstances, we could not find any evidence to support Mr. Ntuli's allegation that CSIR irregularly terminated the MOA based on a fictitious letter of termination dated 21 July 2017. Having made these conclusions, we recommended to the Director General of DSI, in line with Section 6.4c, Roman figure 2 of the Public Protector Act, again to ensure that entities reporting to DSI and administering support programs funded and or administered on behalf of the DSI provide the successful beneficiaries with MOAs and or contracts, providing detailed information regarding programs in which they are enrolled. In terms of this Section 6, subsection 4C, Roman figure 2 of the Public Protector Act, the Public Protector may, if he or she deems it advisable, refer any matter which has a bearing on an investigation to the appropriate public body or authority affected by it, or to make an appropriate recommendation regarding the redress of the prejudice resulting therefrom, or make any other appropriate recommendation he or she deems expedient to the affected public body or authority. We also recommend to the CSIR Chief Executive Officer, in line with this Section 64C, Roman figure 2 of the Public Protector Act, to ensure that Mr. Ntuli is provided with a letter providing a clear statement and explanation, as well as the reasons for his placement in the GIP program by the CSIR in accordance with the Constitution, read with Baja. In addition, we recommend to the CEO to provide feedback on how the recommendation will be implemented. So in this instance, that's why we call it advisory report. The following reports have findings with binding remedial actions. Mukwena versus Free State Department of Police and Roads and Transport. We investigated allegations of undue delay by the Free State Department of Police, Roads and Transport to adjudicate on the application of a private motor vehicle testing station in Buchabelo, resulting in prejudice to Mr. Mukwena. This followed a complaint by Mr. Mukwena lodged in September 2018. He alleged that in January 2018, he applied for a license to operate a private vehicle testing station in Buchabelo, and that by September 2018, he had not received a written response from the department in respect of his applications. So he previously made inquiries regarding his application to the provincial inspector of the department, who in turn referred him to the Chief Director Traffic Management. The latter office further referred him to the head of department, who in turn referred him to the MEC. So the office of the MEC eventually referred him back to Mr. Marumo, who is the provincial inspector, for assistance. So in this instance, this complainant tried to exhaust internal remedies before approaching the public protector, and that's what we encourage the public to do and use us as an office of last resort. So having studied Mr. Mukwena's complaint, we investigated whether the department delayed to adjudicate on his application to operate a private vehicle testing station in Buchabelo, resulting in the prejudice to him, and if so, whether such conduct was improper and amounts to maladministration. We found that the department indeed delayed to consider and adjudicate Mr. Mukwena's application to operate the private station in Buchabelo, resulting in prejudice to him. This conduct was in contravention of the Constitution, which provides that everyone has a right to administrative action that is lawful, reasonable, and procedurally fair. The conduct of the department was in contravention of Section 195 of the Constitution, which also requires public administration to promote and maintain a high standard of professional ethics, and it must be accountable. The conduct of the department was also in contravention of the National Road Traffic Act, read with the National Road Traffic Regulations, as no prescribed fee had been determined by the MEC. The conduct of the department constitutes improper conduct as envisaged in the Constitution and maladministration as envisaged in the Public Protector Act. It should be noted that subsequent to the issuing of a notice issued to the department in terms of Section 7, subsection 9 of the Public Protector Act, the department complied with the proposed remedial actions as follows. That the MEC responded to Mr. Mukwena pertaining to the outcome of his application in a letter addressed to him dated 3 February 2022. That the department sent a letter of apology to Mr. Mukwena dated 2 February 2022, and that the department has indicated that on the 2nd of February 2022, Mr. Silai, the Chief Director of Corporate Services, was instructed to conduct an investigation against officials involved in causing the delay of the processing of Mr. Mukwena's application since 22 October 2020, and report to the HOD by 21 February 2022. To further remedy the maladministration and improper conduct established during the investigation, we directed the acting HOD to ensure that standard operating procedures regarding the adjudication of applications for vehicle testing stations are developed with appropriate timelines and implemented within 120 working days from date of the report, to enable it to conform to the requirements of the Constitution, the National Road Traffic Act, and the National Road Traffic Regulations. Improve the service charter of the department to incorporate applications for vehicle testing stations. and ensure that all officials of the department dealing with applications for vehicle testing stations receive appropriate training on the SOPs within 180 working days of the date of this report. Report to the MEC on the implementation of the remedial action referred to above. The next report, which has binding remedial actions, is Adams versus Stellenbosch Local Municipality. We investigated allegations of improper conduct and maladministration by the Stellenbosch Local Municipality in the Western Cape relating to irregular appointment of Advocate DPA as Director Strategic and Corporate Services and Mr. K. Carolas as CFO. This followed a complaint lodged in May 2019 by Mr. Adams. He alleged that in October 2016, the Municipal Council approved the appointment of Advocate DPA as Director Strategic and Corporate Services. The municipality selection panel recommended a 5-year contract. On the 2nd of November 2016, Advocate DPA wrote a letter to the then acting municipal manager, Mr. Bosman, requesting the waiver of the upper limits of the remuneration of this post and also for a 10-year contract. Mr. Bosman confirmed that he entered into a telephonic agreement with Advocate DPA, and Mr. Bosman was the chairperson of the selection panel, which by consensus agreed to a 5-year contract. Mr. Bosman left the municipality at the end of October 2016. Advocate DPA make it clear in the letter dated 2 November 2016 that she would only accept the council offer after the minister had made a decision on her request in respect of her remuneration. Advocate DPA was later appointed on a 10-year contract. No one, including Mr. Bosman, had any authority to change the recommendation of the selection panel to council. Further, Mr. Carolas was officially appointed CFO for a 10-year term by the council resolution dated 27 March 2019. However, on the 24th of April 2019, a special item was placed on the agenda of the council meeting, and the latter subsequently approved Mr. Carolas' appointment on a permanent basis instead of the 10-year contract. So Mr. Carolas' appointment on a permanent basis was improper and unfair towards other possible candidates. Flowing through from a thorough analysis of the complaint, we investigated whether the municipality appointed Advocate DPA as Director Corporate Service, Strategic and Corporate Services, and whether they appointed the CFO without following, or in fact irregularly. And we found that indeed the municipality regularly appointed Advocate DPA as Director Strategic and Corporate Services and Mr. Carolas as CFO. And the period of 30 days, or within the period of 30 days, with which the council resolved successful candidate for the position, and for the CFO, they had to accept the offer and enter into a final contract, failing which the post had to be re-advertised. Had long expired by that time, the council rescinded that decision. So as the post had to be re-advertised, the municipality had no authority to enter into a written contract of employment with Advocate DPA. So Advocate DPA's appointment was therefore irregular, as it was in variance with the provisions of Section 56 of the Municipal Systems Act as amended. In addition, the resolution of the council to change the conditions of service of the position of the CFO from 10-year contract to a permanent position after the offer had been made to the CFO was improper. It prejudiced other prospective candidates that would have applied had they known that the period of tenure was flexible and could be changed even to a permanent appointment. So Mr. Carolas' appointment was therefore procedurally unfair and at variance with the provisions of the Constitution, as the council should have re-advertised the position of CFO. The municipality's conduct therefore constitute maladministration as envisaged in the Public Protector Act and improper conduct as envisaged in the Constitution. So to remedy this maladministration and improper conduct, the municipal manager must report the irregular appointment to the Western Cape Provincial Treasury for a determination on whether or not the remuneration paid to Advocate DPA and Mr. Carolas constitute irregular expenditure as contemplated by the Local Government Municipal Finance Management Act, and within 60 working days from date of the report, and ensure that internal audit unit on an annual basis continues to review the adequacy and effectiveness of the municipality's system of internal control, risk management, and compliance to laws, regulations, and municipal policies and procedures. Ensure that the audit committee of the municipality in all its quarterly meetings consider the internal audit and Auditor General's South Africa reports to ensure that the recommendations are implemented. The speaker and the municipal manager must ensure compliance in terms of section 165 and 166 of the MFMA, conduct a skills audit with regard to all councillors and officials of the municipality, ensure that the council obtains legal advice from the Office of the State Law Advisor instead of private legal counsel in all cases where it considers changing the conditions of service or the tenure of employee appointed by it or to be appointed by it. Lastly, the speaker must submit a report to the MEC for the implementation of the remedial action referred to above. The next report with the findings in Pillar versus Department of Water and Sanitation. We investigated allegations of maladministration and failure by the National Department of Water and Sanitation to register a servitude on Bailkop Farm 26JQ regarding a water project that was constructed at the said farm. This followed a complaint lodged by Mr. Mpila acting on behalf of the Mpila family in November 2018. In his complaint, Mr. Mpila alleged that the Mpila family are the owners of the farm in question, which is situated within the municipal area of Moses Kotane local municipality in the northwest. He added that during 2017, he discovered that the department had established a water project known as Bapalane Water Project Farm. According to him, the department did not consult the Mpila family. So Mr. Mpila further indicated that he wanted the department to register a servitude in respect of the property and to compensate the family for the usage of the land. Having studied the complaint thoroughly, we decided to investigate whether the department failed or undue delay to register a servitude on the farm was in violation of the relevant laws and prescripts, where we further decided to look into whether the department's failure or undue delay to compensate the Mpila family for the usage of their land was in violation of the relevant laws and prescripts. The issue regarding whether the department was obliged to compensate Mr. Mpila was dealt with in Report 41 of 2020-2022. It was a closing report. That matter was not substantiated. Hence, we now focus only on the issue of registering registration of the servitude. Therefore, we found that in terms of Section 38(1)(d) of the PFMA, it places an obligation on an accounting officer to protect public resources. It is not in dispute that the department established the project. Public funds were used to construct the water project, and the only way to safeguard the project was by registering a servitude. So the failure to register the servitude exposed the state to financial risk in that the landowner may, e.g., build on top of the pipeline, thus making the pipeline inaccessible to the state. Accordingly, the department violated the provisions of Section 38(1) of the PFMA. The conduct of the department in failing to register a servitude constitute improper conduct in terms of the Constitution and maladministration in terms of the Public Protector Act. So it should be noted as well that when the department was served with the Section 7 subsection 9, which is a process where we issue a provisional report and discuss the report with the department, they proposed that with regard to the remedial action require the department to avail sufficient funds to the municipality for the purpose of registering the servitude at Bailkop 26JQ farm in respect of the water project. So the department is engaging National Treasury on municipality transfer, in fact, so that they can transfer funds to the municipality. To remedy the department's maladministration and improper conduct, we urge the Director General to ensure that a servitude is registered in respect of the water project on the farm in compliance with Section 127(3) of the National Water Act. within 180 working days. They requested a longer period because they must still consult with National Treasury. The Director General must further submit to the Public Protector proof of the transfer of the project and the conditions under which it was transferred to the municipality in compliance with Section 38(1) of the PFMA. And the Moses Kotane local municipality, on the other hand, must within 90 working days after receipt of the funds from the department ensure that a servitude is registered at the farm in respect of the water project. The next report relates to Anonymous versus National Health Laboratory Services. We investigated the allegations of financial mismanagement, procurement, and recruitment irregularities, as well as failure by the National Health Laboratory Service, I'll call the NHLS board, to take appropriate action on allegations of corruption and improper conduct leveled against NHLS. So an anonymous complaint was lodged in June 2017, which prompted the investigation. After having analyzed the complaint, we decided to investigate the following 14 issues of the investigation. It's one of the longest reports which we've issued. So whether the NHLS incurred fruitless and wasteful expenditure for reinstating Mr. Ndlangisa, who was found guilty of sexual harassment, and if so, whether such conduct constitute improper conduct and maladministration, whether the institution appointed Mr. Ndlangisa and other personnel in the HR department to their positions without them possessing the necessary qualifications for the job, whether the board ignored a conflict of interest involving an amount of 3.4 million and 2.1 million by Dr. Taka, a board member and CEO of SEED, a company conducting business with the institution, and whether 2016 the board allowed Mr. Mhlongo to serve as a board member after her nomination was, in fact, Dr. Mhlongo, after her nomination was withdrawn by the province that she was representing and replaced by Dr. Hussein, resulting in two board members representing the same province and attending the same board meetings, thereby resulting in the institution incurring irregular expenditure in respect of the board fees claimed by the member concerned. Whether the institution failed to take action against the company secretary, Advocate Dimpelo, for working irregular hours contrary to his policy and for taking unauthorized leave of absence from work for a period of 10 days in 2016. Whether the board failed to take action against Advocate Dimpelo for misrepresenting his skills and qualifications on his CV at the time of appointment to the position of company secretary. Whether during 2016 the institution implemented the job grading results of the company secretary from E1 to E5, just over 1 million to more than 1.7 million, contrary to the report of the job grading expert. Whether the institution disregarded part of the report of the expert during the recommendation that the CEO job grading be changed from F1 to F3 and that of the CFO from E3 to F1, and that the board had failed to act on the alleged discrepancies. Number 9, whether on 14 February 2017, the board allowed the company secretary to destroy documents of the institution without proper authorization, and whether the board improperly failed to take action against the former CEO, Mr. Pillay, and the then CFO, Mr. Area, for the irregular appointment of 2 suppliers, Innovent and HST, and further failed to take action against the companies concerned, thereby resulting in a regular expenditure of over 11 million. Whether the board failed to take action on misrepresentation of retired Professor Shrup, that he was a representative of CHE, which led to his improper appointment to the board, contrary to the requirement of the NHLS, despite the CHE having its own representative, Professor Lawrence, on the board. Number 12, whether the institution improperly appointed the forensic firm, Grant Thornton, without following the proper SCM processes and incurring irregular expenditure. Number 13, whether the board improperly lifted the suspension of senior manager, Mr. Kwete, for contravention of the institution's supply chain management policy. Whether the board allowed the payment of salaries of Mr. Mutsipe who was charged by the then suspended CEO, Ms. Mukhale, and the then CFO, Mr. Zulu, for committing SCM irregularities by assisting a supplier of the institution, Blue Future Internet and Surveillance, to defraud 3 companies through fraudulent cession agreements involving various amounts of money, resulting in criminal cases being opened against the employee concerned. So we found that issues number 1, 2, 11, and 14 were not substantiated, although we found that there was merit to the allegations contained in issues 6 and 13. We did not make findings of maladministration and improper conduct. Further, issue 6 was referred to the Directorate for Priority in Crimes for investigation in terms of Section 6(4)(c), Roman figure 1 of the Public Protector Act, read with Section 34(1) of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. We found that the rest of the allegations are substantiated. For instance, the board did ignore and fail to prevent and manage a conflict of interest by Dr. Taka involving an amount of 3.4 million and 2.1 million. We also found that the board improperly allowed Dr. Mhlongo to serve as a board member after her nomination was withdrawn. We further found that the institution failed to take action against the company secretary, Advocate Mpilo, for working irregular hours contrary to institution's policy and for taking unauthorized leave. Moreover, we found that during 2016, the institution improperly implemented the job degrading results of the company secretary. And in addition, we found that the institution improperly disregarded part of the report of the expert regarding the recommendations that the CEO job grading be changed from F1 to F3 and that of CFO from E3 to F1. We also found that on the 14th of February 2017, the board allowed the company secretary to destroy company documents of the institution without proper authorization and contrary to the institution's policies. Also substantiated was the allegation that the board improperly failed to take action against former CEO, Mr. Pillay, and the CFO, Mr. Area, for the irregular appointment of the 2 suppliers, Innovent and HST, and further improperly failed to take action against the companies concerned, thereby resulting in a regular expenditure of over 11 million. Lastly, our investigation confirmed that indeed the institution improperly appointed a forensic firm, Grant Thornton, without following proper SCM processes, thereby incurring irregular expenditure. So to remedy the maladministration and proper conduct, we took the following remedial actions. The Minister of Health take cognizance of the findings regarding the unethical conduct and maladministration by the board relating to the irregularities mentioned in this report. Ensure that the board considers the report and, where appropriate, act in terms of the PFMA regarding the maladministration outlined in the report and reprimand or take appropriate sanction or directive under the circumstances. Ensure that the board considers the acts of improper conduct referred to in this report and takes appropriate disciplinary action against the officials of the institution in respect of the conduct. Ensure that the board, in exercising its oversight responsibility over the institution's affairs, effectively and sufficiently observe and apply the principles enunciated in the Part 5 of the King 4 Code on Corporate Governance. So the chairperson of the board, to ensure that the board takes cognizance of the findings of maladministration and improper conduct referred to in this report. The board, in exercising its oversight responsibility over the institution and the affairs, effectively and sufficiently observe and apply the principles as initiated in Part 5 of the King 4 report, King 4 Code on Corporate Governance. The board evaluates the effectiveness of the institution's internal controls on the applications of its SCM policy and remuneration policy, with a view to take corrective actions to prevent recurrence of improprieties. The board members attend a training course or workshop in public procurement. The board adopts a monitoring system in line with the guiding principles outlined in Part 4 of the King 4 Code on corporate governance. That ensures that proper procurement processes and HR processes are followed in appointing service providers and individuals. The board ensures that the institution's CEO SCM officials, managers involved in the institution's procurement processes attained as well training courses or refresher workshop on public procurement. The board to take note of its responsibility in line with the guiding principles, and further, the board ensures that the institution's personnel responsible for labor relations also attend a refresher course on labor relations processes relating to discipline, in particular code of good practice on suspensions and dismissals, as well as principles of ethical conduct and accountability. The board ensures that the inclusion of the provision of a strategy in terms of in its terms of reference to the Remuneration and Human Resource Committee to encompass a prerequisite for compulsory submission of pertinent recommendations for any job grading. The board studies and fully consider the report and, where appropriate, act as contemplated in Section 84 of the PFMA. The board reports to the National Treasurer and the Auditor General particulars and details of the alleged financial misconduct and steps taken in connection with such financial misconduct. So the various findings which we've made, where we required the board to act, and the board should refer the issue relating to Mr. Dlangisa's position for consideration by HR and the CEO, with a view to correct it to indicate in no uncertain terms in the Oracle system. The board should also issue on the issue of company secretary's position regarding the placing of job grade for the relevant position from E1 to E5, and refers it to legal services and the CEO for advice on appropriateness. So the board ensures that the institution creates timelines to deal with ambiguity relating to proper disposal of NHLS board documents. We also had findings or remedies which are supposed to be implemented by the CEO of NHLS. The CEO must ensure that the institution's management team takes cognizance of the finding of maladministration and improper conduct, and put relevant measures in place with the view to take corrective action. Ensure that prior to signing formal contracts or service level agreements with a contractor, that such contracts and agreements are legally sound to avoid potential litigation. And the institution should adopt a monitoring system that ensures that proper procurement in appointing service providers by the SCM and the recruitment processes in appointing individuals by the HR department are followed. And together with the board, evaluate the effectiveness of the institution's internal controls and monitoring systems. The offices of the Chief Procurement Officer of National Treasury and the Auditor General must take cognizance of the findings of the improprieties and remedial action mentioned in this report for purposes of their future monitoring in areas identified as inadequate or lacking within the institution. Lastly, the head of the DPCI must take cognizance of the allegations outlined, where we are referring this matter relating to misrepresentation of skills and qualifications in the CV of Advocate Mpila at the time of his appointment to the position of Company Secretary. Khatle versus SITA, State Information Technology. We investigated allegations of maladministration in the appointment of service providers and employees by SITA. The investigation followed a complaint by Mr. Khatle in 2018. Requested the investigation to focus on the contracts irregularly awarded to forensic data analysts, co-focus, Accenture, Fidelity Security Services, Parahelic, CC, and JICA, Africa Advisory Services. The contracts irregularly awarded to the firm of attorneys also Bowman, Seu Attorneys, and Sianri Digital Forensic Lab. The irregular appointments of Mr. Stembile Senti as an executive in the Chief Executive Officer's Office, and Mr. Kenneth Winand as a consultant in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. And essentially, Mr. Khatle contended that SITA's conduct regarding the foregoing allegations was unlawful, improper, and constitute maladministration. Based on analysis of the complaint, we identified the following issues for investigation: whether the appointment of forensic data analysis, co-focus, Accenture, Fidelity, Security Services, Paraheli, Giga Africa, Advisory Services, Bowman Attorneys, Hales Attorneys, and Sinra Digital Forensic Lab were not consistent with the applicable supply chain management prescripts and whether such conduct constitute improper conduct, and whether the recruitment of Mr. Stembele Senti as an executive in the office of the CEO and Mr. Kenneth Winant as in the office of the CFO was not consistent with applicable prescripts. We found that SITA did not follow applicable supply chain management prescripts in the appointment of forensic data analysis. The evidence indicates that SITA deviated from inviting competitive bids to appoint forensic data analysts. The deviation is, however, deemed to be irregular as it did not comply with the applicable supply chain management prescripts and processes regulating the conduct of SITA. We also found that SITA did not follow applicable prescripts in the appointment of core focus, and we further found that SITA did not follow applicable supply chain management prescripts in appointing Accenture. And also we found that SITA did not follow applicable supply chain management prescript in the appointment of Fidelity Security Company, and SITA did not dispute in its response to the allegations that the appointment of Fidelity was not in line with procurement processes and is considered to be irregular. And also SITA considered that it incurred irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful expenditure in this regard. Moreover, SITA did not follow applicable supply chain management prescripts in the appointment of Paraheli. And the reasons provided by SITA for the appointment did not, however, fall within the exceptional circumstances envisaged in the single source procurement. And there was insufficient information to draw a conclusion on the allegations that SITA did not follow applicable supply chain management prescripts in the appointment of Giga Africa Advisory Services. Accordingly, no conclusion can therefore be drawn on the allegations that SITA incurred irregular expenditure by exceeding the approved budget for the contract. We found that SITA did not follow applicable supply chain management prescript as well in the appointment of Bowman Attorneys, Bowman's company, and SITA considered in its response that the appointment was not in line with the procurement processes. There was insufficient information to draw a conclusion on the allegations that SITA did not follow applicable supply chain management prescript in the appointment of HEU for the provision of legal services. We also found that SITA did not follow applicable supply chain management prescript in the appointment of Sianri. And further, we found that the recruitment of Mr. Senti in the CEO's office was not in accordance with the applicable prescripts. The process followed by SITA in the recruitment of Mr. Senti for the position of the executive officer was not in compliance with the prescripts. Lastly, also we found that the recruitment of Mr. Winant in the CFO's office by SITA was not in accordance with the prescripts, therefore was also irregular. To remedy the maladministration and improper conduct, the accounting authority of SITA to ensure that SITA's supply chain management frequently monitors compliance controls in line with the PFMA, and to ensure that deviations from inviting competitive bids in terms of treasury regulations are used strictly to procure goods and services of critical importance and only when it is impractical to invite competitive bids. Ensure strict compliance by employees with the prescripts and policies relating to SCM environment. Ensure regular training, mentoring, coaching of employees on policies, procedures relevant and applicable within their area of responsibility. And in terms of paragraph 1.2.3 and paragraph 1.12.3 of Annex C of the Code of Ethics of the 2017 Supply Chain Management Policy, and in consultation with SITA's legal advisor, consider investigating and where appropriate take a corrective action against any other individual implicated in any wrongdoing in the SCM and HCM environment identified in this report. And further, we also then referred this matter to the Auditor General to take note of the findings relating to improper conduct and maladministration by SITA reported herein, and within its own discretion consider the findings and remedial action in this report and consider taking any action deemed appropriate. We also refer this matter to the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies to take cognizance of the findings of maladministration and improper conduct by SETA and include it in her oversight role over SETA, the monitoring of implementation of the remedial action taken in pursuit of the findings in terms of our powers conferred under Section 182(2)(c). So the Speaker of the National Assembly, to ensure that the report is tabled before the Communications Portfolio Committee for deliberations regarding investigations conducted into allegations of financial misconduct committed by members of the Accounting Authority in terms of Treasury regulations. Instances of irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure have been investigated to determine if disciplinary steps need to be taken against liable officials, and as well disciplinary steps were taken against any officials who made or permitted irregular expenditure. DPCI or Directorate of Priority Crime Investigation to consider this report and establish if any acts of impropriety identified herein amounts to acts of criminal conduct in terms of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, and if so, pursue criminal investigations against the perpetrators. So, and the next report also relates to SETA and still refers to the allegations that the former CEO, Dr. Sidumo, who also incurred irregular procurement or was involved in irregular procurement processes and unauthorized deviations and expansions within SETA. And the complaint was lodged by Anonymous. In fact, it was lodged in 2018. And a complaint was relating to the appointment of a company called CPAL, which was appointed by means of a deviation from normal procurement processes without the required approval by National Treasury. So the appointment of CPAL is said to be suspicious due to the relationship. There was allegation that there's a relationship between Dr. Sidumo, the former CEO, and Mr. Tami Msimango, the managing director of CPAL. So Mr. Msimango is a friend of former CEO. That was the allegation, and that the former CEO failed to disclose the relationship. So that the expansion of scope of work was approved by the former CEO despite Treasury not supporting such expansion, and the allegation that the former board of SETA failed to hold the former CEO, Dr. Sidumo, accountable for the irregular expansion of work. So the contracts were allegedly entered into with the following suppliers: Internet Solutions, eThekwini Municipality, Halmsa IT, Neotel, Telcom, Liquid Telecommunication, Labware, CHM Vuwani, Computer Solutions, Infrasol, Enterprise Room, Mediro, Belay, Managed Services, CEO of A2, D24, and Meniko Records Management. Having scrutinized the complaint, we decided to investigate the following two issues: whether the former CEO's relationship with Mr. Msimango, the managing director of CPAL, influenced the appointment of CPAL through a deviation process without the approval of National Treasury, including the expansion of the scope of work of CPAL despite the National Treasury not supporting such expansion, and whether the SETA board failed to hold the former CEO accountable for the irregular expenditure incurred. While we could not establish any evidence to support the allegations contained in the first issue, it was not so with the second issue. In this regard, we found that the board failed to hold the former CEO accountable for the irregular expansion of the contract that was not approved by National Treasury. Irregular expenditure, as or is defined in the PFMA as an expenditure other than unauthorized expenditure incurred in contravention of that is not in accordance with the requisite or any applicable law. So the former CEO and the board or both had an accountability and oversight responsibility to ensure compliance, and we were also concerned about this former CEO having extended this contract for more than 5 years. So the board failed to hold the former CEO accountable for regular expenditure, and in these circumstances, the failure by the board to hold the former CEO accountable for the irregular expenditure of the contract equated to improper conduct as envisaged in the Constitution. So to remedy this maladministration as well, we have indicated that SITA must, the accounting authority of SITA must take cognizance of the findings of improper conduct and irregular expenditure by the former CEO, Dr. Situmo Mohapi, and ensure that such action is not repeated and appropriate corrective action is taken to prevent the recurrence of such, to ensure that SITA's supply chain management SCM policy compliance unit on a regular basis monitor compliance to applicable laws, and to consider in terms of section 1.12, in fact paragraph 1.12.1 of Annexure C of the Code of Ethics of the 2017 SCM policy, and in consultation with SITA's legal advisor, consider SITA's duty to report such irregular expenditure. This report was also referred to the minister, and it was also referred to the speaker, because we are picking up a trend within SITA of irregularities as far as procurement of services are concerned. And also we've referred this matter to DPCI so that they can investigate and determine whether there's any criminal conduct which has been incurred. And we've referred the matter to Auditor General South Africa as well, to consider within their discretion whether they can follow up and within their mandate audit such contracts. Lastly, the accounting authority must submit to the public protector within 30 working days from date of this receipt of this report on implementation of in fact it must submit the plan, and which will detail how the reports or the remedial actions will be implemented. We look forward to the full implementation of the remedial action in all the above reports. We call on all the reports to receive this, in fact, all organs of state to receive this report with an open mind. Our door remains open to engage on this, so that to ensure that not only is the remedial action implemented, but that it is also implementable. So as we prepare to step into 2022-2023 financial year, the Private Protector Vision 2023 remains the engine that powers all of our activities. As you will recall, the vision is anchored on 8 pillars, namely broadening access to services, engaging in linguistic in the languages the community speak, spreading our footprint, and leveraging stakeholder relations, entering into agreements that will give effect to cooperation in this regard, projecting the image of being a safe haven for the marginalized, and empowering people with information and knowledge about their rights, cajoling organs of state to establish effective in-house complaints and mechanisms so that the public servants can do their work, and people can, when they go and complain, they can be attended to. And finally, we inspire people to be their own liberators. Over the next year, we will accelerate the implementation of the vision, shifting to higher gear with a view to ensuring that its goals are realized by the year 2023. The details are spelled out in our annual performance plan for 2022-2023, which we have just tabled in Parliament and will be presented to the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services soon. We look forward to the support of all stakeholders in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Public Protector. We will now take questions from the colleagues, and I'm going to request those who would like to pose questions to the panel first introduce themselves and indicate which media houses they are representing. We are operating on a hybrid system. There are those who are following proceedings online, and then we have a few others in the room with us. In the first opportunity, we go to those who are in the room with us, because on the online platform, I have not received any questions thus far. Let me see by a show of hands who would like to pose a question to the panel. Go ahead, sir. Please introduce yourself and the media house you represent.
Thank you. I am Avila Mutila from UNCA. Public Protector, I understand last week or the week before you were in Enoch municipality looking at the Lexington sports facility. I'm just curious on what you found there and the way forward with investigating and what exactly would you look in the sense around the 15 million rand tender. The second question is around the proposed suspension by the president. I just want to maybe an update from you on that, given I understand there was a letter that you wrote back to the president regarding that suspension, saying that he doesn't have the powers to suspend. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. So maybe take us in terms of your, just to clarify what's the way forward, why do you think the president doesn't have powers? Are you making an urgent edict for the suspension to be stayed in the meantime? Just a way forward on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions from the floor? And over to you, PP.
Thank you, Program Director. On the issue of Enoch Mgijima, I will also ask the DPP and the CEO to add if they need to. Indeed, we visited the stadium where apparently 15 or 16 million was spent, and we did the inspection in local. And I must indicate that it was shocking to find or to discover that what has been built there, we don't know, but maybe let's not conclude. On the face of it, I mean, I don't think you'd even spend more than 2 million if you do spend 2 million. So what we will do is that, in fact, the team in the Eastern Cape, led by our provincial public protector, they remained behind and they collected all the evidence, because we also had members of some civics organizations who were saying we also have evidence which we can give to assist you in your investigation. Must also indicate that when we were addressing the executive, the MEC responsible indicated that they've concluded the forensic investigation, and then they will also give us that report, because the challenge was that apparently the documents have been destroyed through fire. But then we indicated that that is not stopping us, because we will also cooperate with other law enforcement. They are also conducting the investigation. But then also we will request assistance from the various, especially other law enforcement agencies, to access the relevant payment systems to check who was paid and how. So the investigation is ongoing, and I must indicate that it's one of those investigations which takes up to 2 years for us to finalize, because it's a complex or involved matter which will require us to deal with the matter. But then I must indicate that there is a new administration. The new mayor who was there joined us, and some councillors which we requested, because the mayor was of the view maybe they mustn't use the facility, but we said no, since we've taken all the pictures and the evidence, they can still use the facility, the communities, because I think that should still be benefiting the community. So that's that on the issue of Enoch Mgijima. DPP, I don't know whether you want to add, or CEO, before I move to the next issue.
Thank you, Public Protector. It is just one issue, the issue of the boreholes which were created, yet they are not in use. There are lavatories in the facilities. The lavatories also cannot be used. So even though members of the public go and utilize the facility, but they do not have access to the lavatories as there is no water in the facility.
You are covered. Thank you, CEO. Yes, and then on the issue of the alleged or the intention to suspend, we wrote back to the president indicating that after consulting with the legal team, that he's conflicted and He acknowledged during the litigation of Kusasa that since there's that, in fact, it was a pending litigation, but then that matter was finalized, though the matter is still before court because the issue of the unsealing of the SCR17 bank statement, though the High Court, I think, didn't agree to the unsealing. I think that matter is being appealed, though it's the EFF which is appealing it. And I think it's before the SCA or before the ConCourt. But on the other hand, there are several investigations which are before the private protector, as you know, the leak of the discussion in the NEC meeting and the other matter relating to the Zimbabwe trip. And again, we received another complaint relating to what transpired with JSC about the appointment of the Chief Justice. So we were raising those issues that possibly those should be taken into consideration. But also we raised a number of issues with the Speaker on the process she followed in referring the matter to the President, whilst the process, or there were still deliberations between ourselves and the committee. So what I would indicate is that finally the President's legal team agreed that let's pen the response to the intention to suspend until such time the matter then is ventilated in court. So we will be dealing with that. They've agreed to timelines on how we are going to process the matter, and there would be a moratorium then on the suspension for now.
When are you taking it to court? When are you taking it to court?
I think we will be filing our papers by tomorrow. Yes. And apparently, because there's an agreement between our legal teams on changing of pleadings and documents, but then it will depend as well whether the Judge President agrees to those timelines. We are proposing that by the 25th or 26th of April, the matter will be heard in court.
So what exactly are you taking to court? The suspension itself, or?
I think on that one I won't deliberate much. We will be taking the process to court. So we will share the information as soon as the papers are finalized, because the papers are not finalized yet.
Thank you, Public Protector. Are there still any questions? Check with the online links if there are any questions. But it seems like everyone is covered. There are no further questions, in which case I will propose that we adjourn the press conference. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Please indicate the statement. The full reports will be uploaded on the website. Because they are being uploaded.
The last question. Because I wanted to even tell you that CEO note paragraph so note paragraph so. Because if it's captured like that in the report, then it's a problem. It's only. Okay. Yeah, if it's captured like